Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the ICEC webinar. And I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping now about how the webinar is going to run and what options the attendees will have. Right now, you're seeing our panelists. And at this point, none of the attendees will have video. But the agenda that was sent out to you basically will run that we're going to basically do a short video. It's about 11 minutes. During the video and afterwards in the Q&A, if you would like to enter a question, there should be a little button on your screen someplace that says Q&A. At any time, now or during the video or during the Q&A, you can press that button and it'll allow you to type in your question. And we'll be monitoring that Q&A and we'll answer your question when we get to the Q&A portion. During the Q&A portion, there's also another small button that says raise hand. We'll be watching the attendee list. If you raise your hand in the attendee list by pressing that button, then we'll unmute you, make sure you're unmuted on your device, and then you'll be able to ask your question of Larry during the Q&A. So once we get through Cynthia's introduction and we get ready to start the video, I'm going to mute everybody. Our panelists are all going to stop their video. Then I'll show the video. We'll all come back and we'll do the Q&A. So at this point, I would like to introduce Cynthia Albright, who is the chairperson of the ICEC of Geneva. Cynthia?
Welcome, everyone. Good morning. We're so glad that you had signed up and registered to spend a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening with us on what will prove to be a very interesting presentation by Larry Johnson. So we're so happy to have so many of you attending. And let me thank, first of all, Jim Alderfer, and in the background, Ben McCready, without whose help in coordinating this webinar, we would not be doing this. We'd be using tin cans and strings like we did when we were children. I would like to introduce a special guest that we have with us today. Our mayor, Kevin Burns, has joined us this morning. And thank you, Kevin, for being with us here today.
Thank you very much.
We're so glad for that. I think, yes. Oh, they're waving to you. Okay, very good, very good. You can see the names of all the panelists here, although Pam Cabine is really not the second Larry Johnson, but we've had some issues with changing the name. So I'm Cynthia Albright. Larry Johnson is there with Mary Jane, his wife, and we have Saint Nicolas, direct from Croatie. Does he have a wife named Brigitte back there?
Yes.
And Gary Roynard is joining with them, and then Larry with Pam, that's changed now. And Carl is here with me. So we will begin this, and I just have a few words to say to our French friends. I did not have my usual 3 glasses of wine that are required to speak French, so excuse me for this, but let me say bonjour à nos amis à Croatie. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à notre présentation aujourd'hui. C'est avec beaucoup de plaisir que je vous présente notre maire, Kevin Burns, qui sera avec nous aujourd'hui. Bonjour, Mayor Burns.
Bonjour.
Après la vidéo, si vous avez des questions, vous pouvez les poser en français et Johnny ou Pam seront heureux de les traduire. Et maintenant, je vous présente notre artiste, Larry Johnson. And Jim, you may start the video.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to play about 11-minute video of Larry in his studio. So if all of our panelists would please stop your video.
Yep.
I'm going to share my screen. Start the video.
Hello, and welcome to my studio. My name is Larry Johnson, and I live in Geneva, Illinois. My wife Mary Jane and my son Anthony have lived here for almost 30 years. We are located about 40 miles west of Chicago. I grew up in central Illinois and became interested in art, especially sculpture, while attending high school at St. Bede Academy, a Benedictine school in Peru, Illinois. I attended Fontbonne College in St. Louis, Missouri, where I received a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in both sculpture and painting. During my years in St. Louis, I was the studio assistant to Rudy Turini, an Italian sculptor from Florence, who was a student of Ivan Nestrovich, a former Eastern European sculptor who emigrated to the United States and taught at Notre Dame University. My graduate studies began at the University of Chicago, where I studied with Virginio Ferrari, internationally known sculptor from Verona, Italy. I finished my graduate studies at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois, where I was influenced in foundry and metal casting techniques by Thomas Walsh, one of the foremost leaders in shell casting advances from the industrial applications to art creation. Artist Herbert Fink of the Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation chaired my graduate thesis committee, which culminated in a master's degree of fine arts in sculpture in 1978. Following graduate school, I built a foundry and cast an 8-foot bronze sculpture of St. Mark with a lion at his feet for a collaborative work with my high school art teacher and sculptor, the Reverend Joseph Hyde, OSB. From that time on, for the next 10 years, I worked out of a studio in our home and did commissions as I had started working at IBM Corporation and continued in a business position for 31 years. 10 years ago, after retirement from IBM, I started L.K. Johnson Studio and have been working ever since. Formerly a warehouse, 4 blocks from downtown Geneva, I divided the space into a gallery and studio. This is my gallery, where my works are exhibited. Let's take a look. Proposal for a memorial to the lost souls of Terezin is an example of an inspiration which resulted from a visit to a Czech holding camp where almost 90,000 Jews died from starvation and disease prior to being transported to an extermination camp. It is a sketch for a larger installation where water would flow down over the sides of the bronze marker, which celebrates and honors the ascending souls of the deceased. The stones atop are symbolic of visits by loved ones and prayers. Some time ago, I did a series of columns, which were a combination of cast bronze capitals and welded steel geometric forms. Messenger is an example. The column, when taken out of the context of an architectural setting, does not have to be vertical, and the organic capital can be placed anywhere on the column. So as I mentioned, I studied with classical figurative teachers. You'll see my work in bronze and my paintings revolve around themes of figurative and organic elements within a context of more solid or geometric structures. The forms emerge, transition, and move into an evolving environment. My latest series, The Portapieces, are bronze panel reliefs in diptych and triptych formats, which are sculpted to portray movements of forms into new dimensions on many, many levels. And before we leave the gallery, I wanted to point out a maquette or sketch, which is an example of how I work with a client to make a proposal for a larger work. This is a maquette of Brother George, a 93-year-old monk who greeted students arriving at our academy daily. It was done in plasticine clay and, once approved, became the model for the larger piece, in this case, 5 feet in bronze. Last month, after almost a year of work, I installed my latest commission, an 8-foot bronze of St. Benedict for the Benedictine Sisters in Lisle, Illinois. In addition to the large piece, they wanted 2 bronze copies of the original maquette. Here you can see that I'm preparing to mount the castings into a limestone base for safety and security purposes. So we have talked about maquettes, which are my drawings or designs for a larger piece. Now, to go one step further into the process, after the model is approved, I have to build an infrastructure to support enough clay to model the full-size sculpture. Usually, pipes, steel, wire, and plaster are used to construct an armature to hold the heavy clay. The clay is then modeled until both the client and the artist are pleased. Then plaster molds are taken in sections. The mold sections are removed and the clay torn down and reused. The mold sections are cleaned and prepared for melted wax to be brushed into the negative shapes. Once the wax is 3/16 of an inch in thickness from repeated brushing of the melted wax, the hardened wax pattern is removed from the plaster mold section. It is cleaned and trimmed so that it fits precisely to its adjacent pieces. The wax patterns are then transported to the foundry, where they are coated with a heat-resistant mold material, and the wax is then burned out. Then, molten bronze is poured into the cavity where the wax once was, hence we call it the lost wax casting process. The mold is broken off and the cast sections are then welded together and patinated with acid to begin the colorization or oxidation of the metal. Another recent commission is called Prairie Girl, a 5-foot bronze commissioned by a local family who had lost their 19-year-old daughter. They wanted a sculpture to celebrate the vitality of youth. So I posed a young lady holding a cardinal, the symbol of the return of a lost soul, our state bird, and the mascot of her college. The piece was then donated by the family to the Park District, and you can see it in its location at Peck Farm Park in Geneva, Illinois. Several years ago, I was commissioned by our local Chamber of Commerce to create a bronze commemorative relief in recognition to a local long-term board member and philanthropist, Miss Jamie Daniel. The imagery I used was a column or pillar stemming from the block of Jamie's name, budding into bronze magnolias, as she was a native of the South, It is hung in the Geneva Visitor Center. I also do portraits and commissions upon request. Here are some examples of some prior figurative works. I hope you enjoyed our time together. You are always welcome to visit my studio or follow me on Facebook and Instagram and check out my website at lkjohnsonstudio.com. Following this video, we will have a Zoom call to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, our panelists can all start their video.
Bravo, Larry. It's fantastic.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yes.
Amazing.
Great, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Art Appreciation 101 never really taught all those steps that you have to go through to create such a masterpiece, and to say nothing of the inspiration you have to create and envision something that can embody what you want to portray, but also what your clients wish to see and hope to see. So we can't thank you enough for sharing this with us. This is
Well, you're welcome.
amazing.
It was my pleasure.
Kevin, I can tell already that you probably want to say something.
Well, I think I just want to echo what you said, Madam Chairwoman, that Mr. Johnson and the entire Johnson family are treasures to the city of Geneva. And what you've sculpted and what you've given voice to means a great deal to all of us who call Geneva home. And we thank you for sharing your talents with us. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that.
Of course.
All right. Well, I guess we're entering the question and answer period here. So if anyone has a question for Larry, I don't see anything right now in the Q&A. I do see that Richard has a question. So Richard, you should be unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question. Are you there, Richard?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
we're
we
here.
are. Writing at the same time.
We were writing at the same time, but we'll stop writing
Wait, here we are. Send
and
love.
we'll send this.
Voilà. Hello?
Okay.
You there? Wait. It's because we have take it away, that thing.
No, that's all.
okay.
We'll put it aside.
Okay. Hello? Are you there?
Yes, we are. Go ahead and ask your question.
No, actually, I'm a sculptor myself, so I know the procedure of making a bronze, and it was very interesting and very well made. And I love his sculptures. So we would just say hello to you all. We do have a family meeting with our children right now. So we just wanted to give all our love to you all, and we were so happy to see you.
And congratulations. It was really very well done and very interesting. So good luck. Love to all. And we hope to have another chance to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great seeing you.
I'll add here that Maud
Oh, love to see you. I love this.
Ducheur is a bronze sculptor in Croissy, and some of you may have had the privilege of seeing some of her work when we had a group of artists from Croissy about 6 or maybe more years ago, and we used the Water Street Studios venue because we had so many artists and so many beautiful pieces that were represented. So someday, Larry, we would love to have you meet Maud and share your work and your enthusiasm together.
Love to see
Yeah.
you.
That would be wonderful.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much for your comments. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Hope
Hope to see you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. Au
Bye-bye.
revoir.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we do have a question from Carol Cummins that came in through the Q&A. So Larry, can you say more about what inspired you as a child to become an artist? Also, can you describe how your job enabled you to keep your creativity going?
Two good questions. I would say the inspiration was really not so much in childhood as it was in my early high school years, where I went to a Benedictine academy in Peru, Illinois, and studied with a sculptor and had the opportunity to learn about, three-dimensional art, which was extremely stimulating for me. And that kind of launched my interest in my career going forward. Once I graduated from graduate school with an MFA in sculpture, in order to pay the mortgage, as it were, I started with IBM, which ended up, being a 31-year career. However, in the first 10 years of that career, I was able to operate a studio out of my home where I did commissions, and I had a gallery in Chicago and Naperville, Illinois, that represented me. After 10 years with my career, I started traveling every week. And so I put a kind of a hold on the creative piece, obviously trying to bring some of those juices into my job at IBM, which kind of activated my career from a business standpoint and kind of kept the stimulation for being creative in my approach to business for the next 21 years. So luckily I was healthy, and when I retired after 31 years, I opened the studio 10 years ago on Stephen Street here in Geneva, and I've been working every day since.
All right.
I hope that answers the question.
How many hours a day do you work, Larry?
Well, it all depends. I just received a new commission, Johnny, for the signature piece for the St. Charles Public Library. So I've been working on that piece every day, and I work until I get tired as an older person. I work in every day on the piece. And right now, I just met with the client last week, and we're approaching the approval point of the clay piece, which is probably 5 by 3 foot relief that will go on the mantle in the newly renovated St. Charles Public Library when it opens in the spring. So it'll once I finish the pattern, make the plaster molds, as I mentioned in the film, and then do the wax patterns. Those will go to the foundry, and that is a process that'll take 2 to 3 months before I receive the raw casting back to my studio, where I make all of the welds disappear and finish the surface, and then apply the patina or the acids to start the oxidation process and start changing colors on the surface of the bronze.
Okay. We have some more questions in the Q&A, Larry.
I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't hear you.
We have some more questions coming from the Q&A. So,
Okay, I'll let you read them.
okay. The first one I have here is from Philippe. And Larry,
Hi.
how long did it take to do the Saint Benedictine statue?
Great question. The Benedictine, hi, Philippe. It's so nice to hear from you. I'm sorry I can't see your face, but we had such a nice time when you hosted us last year at your home. Thank you. And hi to Pascal. The Benedictine sisters interviewed me on July 3rd of last year. And then it took about a month or so before we came up with a contract. and they agreed to the terms. And then we started the maquette, and you saw 2 bronze copies of that maquette. There were some lulls in the process based on the ability for the client to review the pieces both in the maquette stage and also in the large stage, the full scale 8-foot stage, which obviously took some time. And then the foundry piece, once we've delivered the patterns to the bronze foundry, that took about 3 months. So almost a year of work, but not constant. I hope that answers your question, Philippe.
Thank you, Larry. Next question from the Q&A is, can you expand on how you begin a project? You use the model. Do you use photos? Do you do sketches from different angles before beginning sculpting?
Actually, I had an Instagram of St. Benedict from 571 AD, and I used that. No, I'm just kidding. That was a little.
That question was from Sandy, by the way. I'm sorry.
Sandy, hi, Sandy. Actually, the beginning of the process is a dialogue. I work in a very collaborative fashion with the client, so that I capture what they want to portray in the piece, whether it be the gesture, the meaning, the thought behind the piece, some of the imagery, etc. So for an example, when I met with the Benedictine sisters, having grown up in a Benedictine environment in schooling, asked them all kinds of questions. And their comment was, we don't want St. Benedict portrayed as a senior person. We want him portrayed as a young person. We want him to look youthful, energetic, inviting, because this is the gift, the legacy gift of the particular sculpture to the residents of Villa Benedict. So the sisters are asking for a piece that welcomes the residents who are going to be staying at Villa Benedict to that location. So my translation, after a couple hours of talking back and forth, was to roll up his sleeves, to not give him a Moses-like appearance, nothing stoic, nothing rigid, nothing traditional in terms of all the imagery that I had seen of St. Benedict in my youth and growing up. So that's how he ended up being, shorter cropped beard, a little bit longer hair, a smile on his face, sleeves rolled up, walking with almost bare feet, just some very simplified sandals to represent the humility of his being and what he portrayed, with only the pectoral cross as being the sign of his sainthood and his faith. So same thing with Prairie Girl. It all began with a lengthy conversation with the client who didn't want a portrait of their 19-year-old daughter. They basically wanted to do a piece donated to the city that portrayed the vitality of youth. They wanted it to stimulate viewers to respect and identify with the richness and vitality of youth. So it wasn't a portrait, and because the daughter was, of all their children, was the only one who was born on the prairie and died on the prairie, they wanted it to be very much portrayed as the piece portraying a prairie girl. So with the kind of a timeless garb, and then it was my idea to incorporate the cardinal, which is not only the symbol of the state of Illinois, her alumni, ISU, but also represents the symbol of the return of a lost soul. So that's kind of how the pieces evolve over time. Hope that wasn't too lengthy of an answer.
We have another question from Johnny from Parik. How do you decide where you will cut the division of the two halves of the mold?
Okay, it's a great question. It's a very physical question. So the easy answer to that is, if I were making a ball, a basketball or a soccer ball, the separation or the shim line would be two hemispheres, so that each half would equally pull off of the half of the ball that I'm making a mold of. So a ball would take two halves. When I divide the large piece, like St. Benedict, for an example, that ended up in 24 sections of mold pieces. And they were divided so that I could pull off each section easily without any undercuts, meaning cuts that went against the grain, so that I would be able to pull the wax freely from the plaster mold when I painted in the hot wax. So I don't know if that answers your question. The interesting thing is, based on the limitations of the bronze foundry, they ended up cutting my 24 wax patterns into 42 pieces. And those, in order to fit into the furnace to melt out the wax, and then those 42 pieces had to be all welded together. And then part of my job in getting the raw casting back to the studio is making all those weld lines disappear. Okay. Hope that answers the question, Johnny. Nicholas?
Congratulations. That wasn't me, it was Pierrick. It was
okay. Pierrick.
I guess we have a follow-up question from the peanut gallery here.
Oh.
How do you get the weld lines to disappear?
Okay, great question. Basically, I use high-speed grinder for the highest parts, and then I use sanders. Then I use chisels, and I use files, and then I use different types of abrasives in terms of sandpaper and grits to make that weld line disappear or look like the surface on either side of it, so that when you look at a sculpture, you have no idea where that weld line was, and try to make it disappear. So it's kind of it's a masquerade technique that you have to kind of go through. And sometimes you're making the surface very rough, and sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it's somewhere in between. So it's kind of a very interesting process, but it does take a lot of time.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
All right, more questions from the Q&A. From Ernie Mahaffey. How are artists and the artistic communities doing in Kwasi and Geneva now?
I'll let Johnny answer the question on the Kwasi piece. Here, I can only talk about the fact that I have been very, very busy for the last few years, so 4 or 5 years, and I think that's a good sign. I think there is more art in public places, especially when we look at what's happening in St. Charles, in Geneva. Things are starting to happen to place pieces in the public eye, in the public presence. So I think that's a very positive sign that things are happening. Johnny, how are things in Kwasi?
Kwasi, unfortunately, we've been, virtually in shutdown. We call it confinement since March. So there's not really anything on the cultural side going on. And in fact, I sent to some of you, all the participants who came over, the delegation that came last year to Kwasi, I sent this morning a website, which I have just put together with some friends. I'm a member of a Lions Club, and we tried to have an art exhibition in March in the chapel, the little chapel in Saint Leonard in Kwasi.
Yes.
And because of COVID, that was cancelled. And then it got rescheduled to happen in November. And again, the second wave cancelled that. So as a result, we've had to put it on the web.
Yes.
And so I've sent it out to all of you who came last year. But if you can, Cynthia, spread it around just so people can see what we're trying to do, because it's an attempt to raise some money for handicapped children here in Kwasi. So it's one of our projects. But to answer the question, unfortunately, culture has taken a really bad hit with COVID. And of course, nearly all concerts, we used to have concerts on a regular basis, and they've all been cancelled. So there's nothing virtually, and we'll have to wait certainly until well into the spring before we can hope to see public gatherings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny and Larry. Another question from the Q&A from Angela. What is your favorite part of the process, the sculpting process?
Oh, another good question. Yeah, Mary Jane just mentioned the end, which is always good, although St. Benedict, the sisters are postponing the dedication ceremony because of COVID, so they don't know how to assemble, 300 residents plus their guests, etc., and socially space them out for a dedication. So they're going to wait until the spring, hopefully. The best part, I think, is really the creation of the model. It's translating the thoughts of the client and myself into one particular gestural piece. And it's always, very small, because that's the economic way to sketch a larger piece, is with a small maquette or sketch. So that is my favorite piece, Angela, and I really favorite part of the overall process. To answer your question.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Mary Ellen.
Hi, Mary Ellen. One of my favorite artists.
What is the interplay between your two-dimensional and three-dimensional work?
Okay, another great question. Kind of a philosophical one, but I'll start out by answering in the sense that the 5-foot Italian sculptor Rudy Turini, you saw the Italian immigrants that's in front of a church on the Italian Hill in the start of the film that Anthony did at Fontbonne College. I helped him. I handed him all the clay that he put up on that piece for that commission. He always told me that unlike painting, sculpture is 90% or 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. Painting, on the other hand, as Mary Ellen will attest to, is probably the flip of that, and it's a little bit more cerebral and more thought-provoking, and there's a little bit more kind of visionary approach as opposed to the physical approach. My painting is really an offshoot of sculpture. So for me, doing painting, and I was heavily influenced by the abstract expressionists, etc., but also by figurative artists, as my sculpture is. My painting is really done in reaction to the sculptures. It's about the same concepts, although it's a little bit harder to see. The concepts are emerging forms, transitional elements, the juxtaposition of organic forms, life forms, with more rigid geometric forms that talk to kind of the evolution and the beginnings of life on many different levels. So there's a lot of spiritual stuff and a lot of physical stuff. There are elements of the figure in terms of bone and muscle and tendon and etc. That I incorporate in the paintings, which are reflective of the sculptures. Long-winded answer, sorry.
And the last question that we have out in the Q&A from Dominique. Are you making small sculptures as well as monumental ones we saw in the video?
Just starting right now. Actually, I was doing a set of proposals for a church in Wisconsin, St. Raphael's, and I did a series of small, 6-inch direct wax models of St. Raphael blowing a trumpet, announcing, heralding the arrival of Christ, etc. And for some reason, the overall proposal did not work out for the much larger piece, but I did start. I had the maquette or the sketch cast in bronze, and now what I'm going to do is to, which was purchased, but I'm going to actually take it back, and we're going to make a latex or gelatin mold of the bronze, and then do replicas of that in terms of a limited edition, 10 or 20 or whatever. So small pieces.
Larry, can you just tell us, where is the Foundry? Where is that?
The foundry I use is called Art Casting of Illinois. It's run by a husband and wife team, and it's in Oregon, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half directly west of Geneva. And it's been a great relationship over the last 15 years that I've done business with them. They're very tuned in. They do lots of monumental pieces, whether it be Michael Jordan at the United Center in Chicago, or Gerald Ford in the sculpture of Gerald Ford in the President's Hall of Sculpture in Washington, etc. There's just thousands of huge monumental pieces.
Wow. Can I ask a question of Mr. Johnson?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Mr. Johnson, this may be a question that's on other people's minds, and forgive me if my articulation is not at its best, but do you anticipate, or do you and your artist community anticipate perhaps requests for sculptures to either reflect or reminisce, if that's the proper word, on the pandemic itself? Have you received inquiries from hospitals or healthcare agencies or communities who have suffered extraordinarily because of the pandemic?
Great question, Kevin. I have not personally received a request, but what I see in terms of the websites that I subscribe to in terms of upcoming competitions and commissions is there is beginning to be kind of a very, very much an interest in doing pieces that commemorate, what has transpired, what, kind of the cause and effects of COVID and kind of the good news and the tragic news, etc. So yes, I'm seeing that sort of subject matter is now starting to be alive and well in the artistic community. It'll take a while for it to be proliferated, and I think they're also based on the negative things that we saw in the news about statuary being torn down that commemorated certain aspects of our history, good or bad, not being judgmental. But I think the replacements are going to start to be vitalized throughout the country very soon.
And
If not
perhaps
already.
as a follow-up, most importantly, is there a statue of Mrs. Johnson in the front yard of your home?
There is not.
Wouldn't you think there should be? Yes.
Yes, I do.
All I can say is during COVID, thank God he had a studio to go to.
That's where I'm quarantined, Kevin.
On a lighter note, I have a quick question, or just an observation. Larry, I envision you as a very young child when we were all putting our hands in a cast of plaster to mold our hands and playing with silly putty and molding shapes. Did that appeal to you as a youngster?
Not really. Not really. But it's very interesting. I did a little session with the second graders and fifth graders in one of the Batavia elementary schools a few years ago. And I talked to them about making sculpture, and the topic of the conversation was my favorite tools that I use. And so I brought in all these different tools and hammers and chisels and spatulas, etc. But I said, the best tool is my thumb. And that's what I use as a modeler. I'm not a carver. And so I brought in sheets of clay, moist clay, and I had all of the kids put their thumbprints into the clay and made an impression. And so when I got back to the studio, I actually made the reverse of that and cast it into wax. So it's a piece that I'm still working on, actually, really talking about kind of the seeds of life, which are our children's thumbprints. And I had a call about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or a month ago from one of Mary Jane's girlfriends who had a neighbor that said, we're approaching our 9th anniversary, which is ceramic celebration, I think, plaster, ceramic. Would you do our hands? So I had them come to the studio and they had their mask on, and I told them they needed to practice holding hands at home, and then came to the studio and I photographed their hands in different configurations. And then I had them press their hands, both front and back, into clay. And then I made wax impressions, put the fronts to the backs. And now I'm in the process of manipulating the fingers so that they come up with a configuration that's sculptural. And then I'll cast that for them as their wedding gift or anniversary gift. So yes, hands are important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Yes.
If we don't have any more questions at this point, I would like to start turning everybody's video on. Yes, Cynthia.
A mundane question.
Okay.
Two mundane questions. Okay. You talk about patinizing. I thought I knew the color of bronze because we see it on statues, etc. But
Sure.
what does bronze look like before you do that and oxidize it? And then it probably depends on the size of the sculpture, but let's say on Prairie Girl, how thick might the bronze actually be?
Okay.
Various places.
I'm going to start with that answer first. Bronze, when I paint the hot wax into the plaster molds, my goal is to make it consistently as close to 3/16 of an inch thick as possible. So if you could envision a chocolate Easter bunny, or where it's a hollow format,
Yeah.
that's exactly what the patterns look like. we try not to get thicker than that because then you deal with shrinkage and all kinds of distortions to the surface. So that's the answer to the first question. So it should be all, I mean, I've seen Italian castings in museums where the Italians can pull it off and make it about 1/8 of an inch thick. And you see this portrait, but the whole thing is 1/8 of an inch thick cast. And they're just kind of like flaunting how well they can do casting. But at any rate, bronze in its state, especially in its raw state, is, especially after I've tooled it and gotten rid of the welds and I've used all kinds of abrasives, it's goldish color, yellow, gold, and very, very attractive and very warm. The acids that I use, whether it's cupric nitrate or ferric sulfate or whatever, are all intended to start the oxidation process to begin patination or oxidation with different colors. So, Prairie Girl, I used a whole bunch of browns and blacks and blues and greens. And now if you go out there after 3 years or 4 years, now it's taking on a life of its own and oxidizing blues and some very, very rich browns and golds, which is very nice. So the acid that was used for St. Benedict, I had the foundry do that only because of the scale of it. It would take a lot of torches to heat up the piece to apply the acid at about 240 degrees to warm up the whole thing. And I didn't want to take that chance in my studio. So I had the foundry do it. And that is a mixture of sulfurated potash. I'm not sure what chemical that is, but it's sprayed on hot and it turns different colors of brown. And then once the correct color is achieved, and then the surfaces, I try to wax it so that it becomes a little bit weather resistant for a couple of years. And it won't stay that way forever. It'll eventually all turn blue, all turn greenish blue when we're all, looking at it from a different perspective.
Thank you. In translation for our French friends, that is about 1/2 centimeter, 3/16 of an inch. It's
Yes.
about 0.5 centimeters.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
Larry, we actually have one more question that's come in through the Q&A.
Okay, sure, Jim.
And I'm going to read that to you. And then while you answer that, Ben, our super admin in the background, and I are going to start turning on everybody's video
Okay.
so that we can actually get a look at everyone before we close out the webinar. So here's the question. Do you have any I'm sorry, this comes from Janine. Do you have any family members who are also artists? And do you think any of your artistic ability or creative bent was passed down to you from parents, grandparents, etc.?
Another good question. My parents, in a very simple environment when I grew up, instilled in me a kind of a love of great music and nature. But I have two brothers. One is a radiologist, and I have another one who is a lighting engineer in Hollywood, who was able to win an Academy Award and an Emmy for his creations in the lighting industry for movies and television. So I would say my older brother is probably a lot more creative than I am, but it's kind of a mixed bag. We have different heads and different hands, and take our talents different directions. Great question.
All right, we have put everyone into the panelist session, so you need to make sure that your video is turned on your device. And if it is, we'll be able to see everybody.
I think Brigitte had her hand raised, Jim.
Okay.
Brigitte, do you have a question?
No, Johnny is just pushing on the wrong part.
Well, stop it, Johnny.
It's a great pleasure to see all of you.
It's great to see all of you too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hi.
Philippe and Pascal, yeah. Nice.
How are you, Mr. Burns?
Everyone.
This is Philip speaking.
I know, Philippe, I'm doing well. It's good to see you, sir. You look as handsome
Real
as ever.
pleasure.
Pleasure's mine.
Larry, it was very, very interesting.
Thank you very much.
It was a great job, Larry.
Fantastic, Larry. Very enlightening, interesting, and thank you for answering all those questions, but
Sure.
especially for taking the time to prepare this video. We had this idea of reaching out in some way with our culture across the sea, and some of you, I know, had attended Johnny's perspective and insight on Bastille Day. And so this was our next big way of reaching out to our members here as well as to our friends in Croatie. So thank you, all of you, for attending. We're going to keep this open for a while, so those of you who wish to stay on and chat and send some greetings can do so. And thank you all for spending the time and sharing your Sunday morning. And soon there's a Bears game kickoff probably going on right about now. And I understand that we just narrowly missed interfering with a rugby game in France. So our timing could not have been better. And so
Yeah,
thank
that's
you,
okay.
merci beaucoup, all of you.
The Bears are probably behind by 7 points.
Very good. So
Ernie and Sheila, thanks for the hats from Croatie.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
They're wonderful.
Great. That's great. So hi, Tony and Nina.
Hello, Cynthia. Hello.
It's been a while.
Sure.
And Philippe. So I see Denise is on screen, but not by video yet. So, and Angela, is that Melissa with you and Mark? Yes. Hi, Melissa.
Oh.
Have you been at university, or have you been studying from home the whole time?
I just got home from university, and we're off until late January.
Okay. First semester done, huh?
Yes, it is done, and no COVID. So
Wonderful.
Good for you. That's not true for most college kids, I think. So please join us in a conversation. Jump in, someone.
I'm afraid to get wet.
Henri. Hi.
Yes.
Bonsoir.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yes, because I had some problems to come. My picture, my photograph was black. There was nothing coming out. Okay.
Well, we've got a shiny head at the moment. We've got the top of your head.
Well, I also wanted to thank Larry Johnson for his expose, and I noticed that he's using some French word like maquette.
Yes. That's the only way I know. Thank you.
And yeah. Well, I want to thank you very much, and it was very interesting. And actually, I didn't know that it was so complicated, so complex to make such a bronze sculpture.
Yes.
So now I know.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again. Goodbye.
Thank you very much
Have a good day.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
And just on the question of French and English, I'll send out to a lot of you a very interesting little video which is talking about the Brexit and the way that the French are saying now that the English are going to be out, they can't use any French words. So I'll send it to you. It's very interesting.
Yeah, but
Please do send that. It
yeah,
should-
Johnny, what about Dieu est mon droit, which is the logo of the British monarchy?
Oh yes. Well, that's separate. That's monarchy. That's the monarchy. They're a race apart. They're not.
They're not going to translate.
Are they going to keep the tunnel open?
I think so. Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, very good.
La Grenouillère.
Yep, that's good.
And Donnell, is that Catherine with you that I see? Where'd you go? Did they just leave?
I just saw.
Donnell, was that Catherine with Donnell? They were here a moment ago.
They were. I think they just
they left. Okay.
And Catherine, because maybe she's home from school.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna.
She went, in fact. Yeah.
Okay.
Catherine was one of the artists, actually the youngest of the artists who went to Croissy. Was that almost a year and a half ago? During the festivals of interest to those of us here. They celebrate a festival of the carrots, and they no longer grow carrots there. And here in Geneva, we would have had a festival of the vine. And of course, we don't really grow too much wine here either. So it's interesting that we have these wine festivals celebrating the fall, though. Yes.
Yeah. Well, talking of wine, it's time we had a drink, I think, don't you?
What time is it there, Johnny?
It's 7:10.
Okay.
7:10.
Dinner time.
Dinner time, coming up for dinner time.
Right. It's so nice to see everybody. It's great
Yeah,
to see you.
it was wonderful. It's hard to say goodbye.
Yeah.
It's been way too long.
Have to do it again.
Yeah.
Holiday.
So let's promise to do it again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, Pascal.
Joyeux Noël.
Bye.
Joyeux Noël.
Bye, Nina. Bye, Tony.
Bye bye. Hello.
Bye, Brian.
Happy holidays. Joyeux Noël.
Merci, vous aussi.
Merci.
To all of you.
À la
Bye.
prochaine. À la
Great to
prochaine.
see you, Antoine.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben.
Great to see you too. Bye bye.
Thank you. So
Happy
good.
Hi,
holidays.
Pascal. It's Ernie. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hi, Ernie.
Yes. I wish you a
Johnny,
Merry
great job.
Christmas.
Thank you for having
Merry
us.
Christmas to you too.
Thank you,
Great
Pascal.
job, Johnny.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye. Bisous,
Au
bisous.
revoir.
Au revoir, Saint Nicolas.
Saint Nicolas.
Bye.
Oh yeah, Brucey, there he is. Unmask yourself. Johnny,
Yeah.
unmask yourself.
Johnny, can we see you before you go, Johnny?
Can we see the real you?
No.
He doesn't hear it.
No.
I think he just pasted it. It's like those people attending football games now. They just have a photo. They don't have a real person. He's just sitting there. So thank you, all of you. This was great fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Okay. Until next time.
Goodbye.
No.
À bientôt.
Bye, everybody.
Great job, Larry. This worked out really well. It was nice to learn about your
Well done, Geneva.
history and your path there to sculptures.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Jim, for making it happen.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Evening.
Jim, you good on your end?
Pardon?
Yeah.
Good on your end? I'll hit the end button here momentarily.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right.
Okay.
I think it worked out well. As
I
soon as
think
the
it did too.
recording's available,
Thanks,
I'll
man.
let you know.
Merci. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.